the mnemonic I use is scale. And so the S is about self-awareness. The C is about collaboration and communication. And if you really wanted to cheat and add a third, you could probably add curiosity. The A is really around agility and adaptability. The L is for learning. And the E is for execution, because all the rest is great, but if you don't deliver, it's not really leadership.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script, but you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life. Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Ty Hammond. Today's guest is Geoff Hughes. Geoff is a global technology executive with more than 2 decades of experience leading cloud operations, infrastructure, and engineering across Fortune 100 companies and high-growth tech firms. As VP of Cloud Operations at Digital.ai, he unified 5 companies into one high-performing organization while reducing costs and improving resilience. Previously at NetApp, CA Technologies, Wells Fargo, and Cisco, Geoff built and scaled global teams, delivering 300% service growth and advancing enterprise cloud strategies, and has recently joined RapidScale as Director of Architecture. Known for his focus on availability, security, and performance, Geoff leads through empowerment, building teams that deliver exceptional customer experiences and operational excellence at scale. It's a real pleasure for me to have Geoff on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Geoff.
Thank you, Ty. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So always beginning here, every leader gets their start, has a beginning. I found, of course, that who we are as leaders at work and in life starts taking shape long before we advance to a place of leadership or to the executive office or boardroom. I'm curious, who is someone from your early life or an early experience that shaped the kind of leader that you are today?
Sure. And I think that's a fabulous question, Ty. And I'll reach back. We already talked about decades of experience, but in high school, I was privileged enough to take the Latin language. I'll give a lot of credit and attribution to high SAT scores and ability to get into good schools. But my Latin teacher was our school's first PhD, Dr. Thomas Heslin. Brilliant guy, very empathetic. But I would say one of the lessons that I would reflect back on that might be difficult to really resonate as a teenager is, he was born with type 1 diabetes. He, had the technology that was current for the era of the embedded insulin pump, and he struggled with things that ended up with toes amputated and pancreatic surgery for pancreas replacement. But, this was a guy who everybody was his best friend. He never felt sorry for himself. And he was always looking for ways to serve and uplift. I was a maybe above average athlete in high school, but I played soccer, I played lacrosse, and my senior year, I had swum the prior 2 seasons. And he was like, well, hey, Geoff, you could probably win the athlete of the year award at school if you just swim for me again your senior year. And we had a lot of really competitive swimmers on that team that were good friends, but I was not a competitive swimmer. But I chose ultimately not to rise to that particular challenge, but I highlight that as an example of it's not always the messages that you want to hear. It's the messages that you need to hear that define true leadership.
Well, that brings me right into my next question, which is your own definition of what true leadership is. Of course, we're exploring the essence of leadership here beyond just the sort of tactics or the performance of it. So I'm curious, what does true leadership mean to you, Geoff?
So again, I'm glad that you asked, and I would say that um, I keep a little bit of a mnemonic with me, and I'd love to say that I have the book written somewhere other than in my head. But future me always kind of thinks, "Hey, it'd be really good to kind of capture this and share some lessons." But the mnemonic I use is scale, and so the S is about self awareness. The C is about collaboration and communication. And if you really wanted to cheat and add a third, you could probably add curiosity. The A is really around agility and adaptability. The L is for learning. And the E is for execution, because all the rest is great, but if you don't deliver, it's not really leadership.
Well, I really love that, and I noticed a couple things. One is that self-awareness was first, and
Uh,
I'm actually curious because I followed the SCALE there, and it seems to me, is there a method to the order of those?
I would say it's probably a little bit of hubris or a cheat to try and make the mnemonic something a little bit more memorable or a splashy book cover. But um, self awareness really is key. And you started out with what did leadership look like in early life, and we all hopefully learn and grow and evolve over the course of education or career or sports or wherever life may take you. um, Self-awareness is really a hard one. It's not always easy to look in the mirror and say, this is something I don't like about myself, or this is something that I'm feeling very invested in changing about myself. And so that self-awareness um, can empower or lead you down the path of self-motivation and change, and how you choose to improve or how you choose to have that impact on the circumstances in which you find yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious, in this next question, which is, of course, on that journey of growth as a leader, as a human being that's growing, that's learning, that's adapting, that's evolving, there's these moments, of course, that challenge us, that require us to grow beyond old assumptions. I'm curious, if you can point to an experience that really challenged you, or maybe a turning point in your own leadership journey.
Sure. So I'll share an example, and I'll say thanks for understanding in advance that it may not be the most cheerful example, but I do think it is a transformative journey. Um, I was at Cisco. I was a relatively new manager. I mean, I had some experience, but not a huge amount. Um, and I had hired a project manager. My team was largely split between North Carolina, California, and India. We were a global team. Um, this project manager had approached me, and I made trips to California probably monthly, if not quarterly, to see everybody. But this employee approached me and said, hey Geoff, um, I'm really struggling with cancer, and he had a very substantive workload, and if you believe in servant leadership, if you believe in supporting your team, you have to go where they are, meet them where they are, and do what you can to provide support. And so this went on for some time, and um, I will say it was mid-December. I got a phone call from my team member, and he said, Geoff, um, I'm calling you from a hospital bed that they have moved into my home. And he said, things aren't really looking very good for me. but it's really important to me in order to protect my family. I need to have company benefits through, I'll just say, the 6th of January as an example. Um, and then my family will be taken care of if something happens to me. And I told them, I said, look, I got your back. You let me know what we need to cover. Um, and it wasn't 24 hours after, he said he needed to survive that he passed. And there's a lot super deep to unpack about strength of human will and courage and how you fight through horrible adversity. But one of the things that I will never forget that Cisco gave me as a gift in these circumstances is um, I flew out and was able to attend his funeral and meet his family and um, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back in any way, shape, or form, but they had some kind words for me that I didn't really feel that I had deserved or that I had earned. Um, but when you're a new manager, there's a difference between management and leadership. And, whether it's at the lowest level, fill out your time card or, do your annual HR training or all the nuts and bolts of what you have to do. And then there's, I mentioned execution. There's the what you have to deliver. But we're all humans. We all deserve empathy. We all deserve kindness. And that's not something that I think a lot of new managers or people in positions of leadership often understand. And it was a remarkable lesson for me that kind of shaped me from okay, hey, you got to get after it, get after it, get after it. Why are we 15 minutes late? Why are we a day late? Why are deadlines slipping? Into a lot of people will talk about work-life balance or work-life integration. And there's more to people than what you see in your 8-hour day or your 40-hour week or whatever your work circumstance was. And that um, opened my eyes in the most important of ways on the reason that you do this is for the people. You are there to support your team members. And so that to me um, was an early in management leadership lesson, was how to take care of people.
Such a powerful example and a powerful story. Of course, I guess I'm curious in what way, because I'd love to go just a little deeper there. Obviously, this was a powerful moment you said that helped shape you as a leader. What's your sense of like the assumption that that you let go of at that point? Like, what was the thing that helped you actually or that you let go of or that shifted your perspective in that moment?
I have to admit that this was a good long time ago for me. So my answer may be a little bit of a reach, but when you're new in your career or when you're young in the workforce, it can be very egocentric, right? It's all about me. It's all about how am I growing my career? What am I doing? What is my impact? Am I the rock star? What does it take to be the rock star? Um, as opposed to, the true reflection of a leader is in how he is regarded by his team, his peers. And, it's, there's a humanizing element to it that I would say, Ty, I feel like the words are escaping me here a little bit, but um, it's compassion. It's being real versus being in the box of, I care about this thing that happens to be work related versus I happen to care about you.
I I think that you articulated that incredibly well, and you're really getting at the heart of the whole purpose for this podcast and for this conversation, right? We say, beyond performance for a reason, right? As a manager, that's your, potentially looking through that lens, that's your task, right? Like, get
Yep.
those
Yep.
results.
Very true. Very true.
right? And as a leader, I love that potential. There's so many ways that we could look at that, but potentially looking at one of the distinctions between manager and leader as being, the leader is one who's really taking the whole person into account, not just the business side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they are related, but they are two different disciplines. And they're often cliches for a reason, but you often hear you manage things and you lead people. And while I think that's a little bit of an oversimplification, I think it's illustrative for the purposes of our conversation.
Yeah. Everything that you're talking about right now and these moments that test and shape, they're moments of growth. Yeah. So getting to a point of leadership where you're at, I'm curious, and thinking about the journey that you've had over the past, it sounds like decades of leadership experience. What's been the most valuable investment that you've made in yourself? Whether it's a coaching program or community mentorship, what's really helped you grow along the way?
I'm actually going to share an outside of work story, um, and again, it spans time. But when I grew up, my father was a big believer in not engaging in kids sports other than as a spectator. Like his worldview was very much, you get enough of me at home as a father and a leader. You don't need me to be your soccer coach, your lacrosse coach, whatever, as well. And so I have two sons. And when the older one's soccer coach quit, um, I had a moment where I thought, this is probably a good opportunity for me to step in. And then I kind of heard my father's voice on my shoulder saying, you really want him to have other experiences. And so I chose not to step in and coach my older son's team. Um, Fast forward a few years, and my younger son is playing soccer, and uh, the rules in North Carolina took my younger son's team and cut it in half. So they had a really good team. They were they loved playing with each other, and it was a joy to be a parent on the sidelines. But I said to myself, maybe I made a mistake when I didn't step up and coach my older son's team. Let me go be an assistant coach for my younger son's team. And I would say those 4 or 5 years were some of the most rewarding, not because I was an amazing soccer coach, but because I had the ability to watch these kids learn and grow over time, and to try and be a cheerleader and try and take some of the kids that maybe were not as talented as the others, and try and get them to be their best. I expected it to be a ton of work. Like, I mean, just an absolute, like, okay, I'm going to slog my way through it because it's the right thing to do. And the gifts I got from coaching those boys and coaching that soccer team were far better than I ever would have imagined.
Well, I'm certainly getting inspired over here. I've got, two young sons myself, and, they're both primo sports ages right now. I guess I'd be curious to hear a little bit more from you in that regard, because I think there's so much there. I am often equating, of course, we use the sports analogies, we use the parenting analogies. There's so many of those that really work so well for leadership. But I'm curious if you could cherry pick, I'm sure there's so much, but if you could cherry pick a little bit of how that experience coaching your son's team ended up showing up in the way that you lead. I'm so curious.
Sure. Again, I think the oversimplification is meeting people where they are, and doing what you can to support them, for them to be their best self.
Leadership is so much about what we're shaping for tomorrow. Geoff, curious, what's your vision for leadership, your legacy, or the impact that you want to have in the years ahead?
Gosh. I would like to be remembered as someone who was kind, who was supportive, um, who was an enabler. My if I have the ability, whether it's one person, 10 people, whatever the number is, to have met somebody where they are and for them to be able to look back and say, Geoff gave me a helping hand when I needed it, or Geoff was there when I needed him the most, or yeah, hey, when things really went sideways, like a true leader, Geoff took all of the blame and none of the credit. So if I can have people remembering me fondly, not for being a manager, but for being their biggest cheerleader and their biggest supporter, that would be incredibly meaningful to me.
Really get that sense in everything that you're offering here. There's is such this powerful insight of the shift in the direction or attitude of attention of true leadership really being so much less about, again, what you think other people need than it is about listening to what somebody's potential is, and encouraging and supporting in what is needed there, which it just aligns so well with the way that with the way that I also look at leadership. It's more of an active listening to what's needed rather than a sort of directive telling in that regard, and I'm really getting that from your responses here.
That's not to say that you can't sometimes, I think, like we said earlier, tell people things that they don't want to hear in the spirit of being helpful. Not, there's a lot in the media about bullying or people being nasty or cruel or what have you. And there's no room for that in anything, true leadership, any kind of leadership. But, it doesn't, there are a lot of interesting things online about the difference between being nice and being kind. And being kind takes courage because it means you're willing to deliver the tough message, whereas being nice might just be you're not willing to go deep. You're not willing to have the challenging conversation. You're not willing to push for greatness. And so, again, there's a lot of interesting literature on a words matter approach of the difference between being nice and being kind.
Yeah, I love that. To me, that's that distinction. And asking that question, what is needed here? A true leader is going to be able to say, to really have a fresh perspective based on what's happening, as opposed to, this is what I do all the time in this situation, right? Like more prescriptive. In other words, there is no one size fits. There is no best way. It requires listening to what is happening, to who the person is in that particular context, to really get a sense of what's going to be effective there. Sometimes it's going to be that directive feedback. Other times it may be silent encouragement, but really getting that sense, that listening there all along the way. I'm I'm
Yeah,
curious.
I'll summarize for you. Leadership is not one size fits all. Just because it works with me doesn't mean that it'll work for Sally or Jane or anybody else.
Yeah, the way I sort of think about that is you can't follow somebody else's playbook to the leader that you are, right? To your own success. So,
Very true.
uh, of course, we're talking growth here the whole way through. In what ways are you being stretched or tested in your leadership or in life today?
Well, I would say the most immediate and obvious answer is having recently changed jobs. You have to adapt your leadership style to culture. You have to I mean, you can be the bull in the china shop. I don't find that that's always a good, successful day one, day two kind of strategy. But the how you understand where you are and how you can apply your strengths and your perspective. So it's easy for me to say I'm drinking from the fire hose as we're having this conversation, just because I'm in a new environment and a new situation, and naturally, growth and learning and challenge will come out of that.
Absolutely. Well, uh, this last question here is a little bit more of an invitation. You have the time and you have the space here now to offer to our listeners, to whoever may be listening here, whatever it is that's most in your mind and heart to share right now, anything at all. So, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ty. It's likely borrowed from an entirely different source, like the book Atomic Habits. But one of the things that have struck me, and it applies whether it's leadership or any other skill, and again, this is easily Googleable. I won't get the math right as we're talking here, but um, if you give 99% and you compound that over a year, you end up with a number that's less than one. If you give just 1% extra every day, that compounds into something like a 37x growth. And so I stopped playing soccer as an adult not too long ago and decided to pick up tennis. And my experience on the fall tennis ladder was not a great one. And it's too easy to fall into the negative self language and say, I'm a bad tennis player. But really, the reality is reframed. I'm not the tennis player yet that I intend to be. And so I could be down on myself and say, hey, this was a rough, series of lessons learned. Or I can say, you know what, I got more to go. I got more to contribute to myself in terms of how I learn and grow and choose to compete. So, again, maybe not the best example, but another one of you have to invest in yourself, and leadership is a great self investment. And so I'll just, I think, wrap it up there, Ty, that you don't need a title to be a leader. You need passion, you need motivation. Um, and so, yeah, leadership is definitely a skill. There are some people that are born with it, have an innate talent. Um, but if you're not the leader that you want to be today, just that little bit of extra effort can turn you into the leader you want to be tomorrow.
Beautiful. Well, hearing so much in that, of course, cultivating that beginner's mind, the power of that word, yet. Love that word. That can really help us make it through a lot of challenges. Geoff, I wanted to really thank you so much for the wisdom that you've shared here today with me. I've really gotten so much out of it, and I'm sure that whoever listens is equally going to benefit from our conversations today. Thank you so much for being on the True Leadership Podcast.
Ty, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. I hope we get the opportunity to do it again in the future. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.